Fallout 76 captures the exciting feeling of exploring a vast open world full of unknown locations. Constantly uncovering hidden areas and finding exotic items is just as exciting here as it was in the previous Fallout games, but the game's massive technical problems and multiplayer balancing issues make the entire journey a frustrating experience. Fallout 76 is a technical mess that will have you find the game itself. Fallout 76 has you in control of a vault resident of Vault 76. As the first vault to open its doors to the new world, it's up to you to rebuild America following the nuclear holocaust. There are no humans other than actual players, and they can attack and kill you, if they want. There's a story here about people of West Virginia falling victim to a plague, which has turned the population into a variant of ghoul called the Scorch, that shows potential but falls short due to the lack of meaningful interactions. Instead, you'll play as an errand boy as you try to explore the open world and find out what is going on in this incredibly bland world. Fallout 76 still carries that thrill of finding and discovering unknown locations and hidden items. The map is huge, with plenty of areas provided to the player early on, with level restriction being very limited. If you find yourself in a problematic situation, you can always join other players. Fallout 76 is a multiplayer experience, but encountering a player is rarer than in the beta. Player interaction is sparse due to the map size. You can see everyone who is part of each world and their location through the map. If the player does decide to kill another player, a bounty is placed on their head. Killing that player will earn you some caps, the game's currency, in which there are much more rare in this game than in any other previous entry. This keeps the players from trolling each other, since large bounties will attract other players, and if you attack one player, the other player must also attack. This has led to a lot of issues where players who are attacked can prepare and then inflict fatal wounds on the attacking player. It's an extremely imbalanced system that has a lot of players completely foregoing the P versus P action. Since this is a multiplayer experience, Bethesda has implemented a lot of balancing features. Weight for certain items have been altered, and healing items like stim packs are extremely rare and expensive. Diluted options are available that provide the cheaper option, but healing is primarily done through food, which also prevents you from starving and dehydrating. In concept, it sounds like a great way to ensure that players cannot collect powerful items, but seeing that Bethesda tried to capture the single-player adventure of Fallout 3 and 4 causes the two worlds to collide into a broken mess. Survival mechanics do add another layer of inconveniences that the player has to deal with. Certain foods and water can expose the player to certain diseases that extend through death. When killed, you lose your junk, but since raw materials and crafting plays a larger role in Fallout 76, junk material is just as valuable as anything else. When killed, you can retrieve your junk material, but if you're killed again, you lose everything. In addition, any player who loses all their junk from death is free game for any opposing player. Eventually the items do dissipate, but any player who grabs the material, it's theirs. Fast traveling does exist in Fallout 76, but it's a bit different. You have to pay in order to travel. This is to prevent players from abusing the system, since this is a multiplayer experience. Players pay more depending on how far they want to travel from the point of origin. The only two places that don't require a payment fee are Vault 76 and your camp, which adds another layer. Players can create a camp in an ideal location so they can travel between areas much cheaper. Bethesda has put more emphasis on base building like in Fallout 4, but it's a little more inconvenient. Players use a machine called the camp to create their own fort that must be defended from hostile enemies and players. Fortunately, you do have access to a stash, which cannot be accessed by any other player. Unfortunately, space is limited, and it will get quickly filled up with raw material. In addition, in an attempt to keep your base of operations within multi-servers, the base can teleport into certain areas, which can cause certain explosives to just detonate, like generators, water purifiers, and other items. Players have also indicated that their base of operations sometimes don't spawn at all, and they lose all the material they used to build the base, which adds to the much more broader spectrum of Fallout 76. Its huge technical problems. This is a constant theme in Fallout 76, balancing for multiplayer at the sacrifice of player experience, and it's clear the game cannot handle it. Dips in the frame rate are very frequent during open world segments, and the game can even come to a complete stop or crash completely. During closed sections like inside mines and buildings that require a loading screen, the game runs a bit better, but the open world segments, since everything is happening in real time, the game will dip in frame rate if one player is doing something very densely combat related on one side of the map and the player is doing something on the other side of the map. People on PC have reported that they've had a little better experience, but from what I can tell, these are players who have a very expensive computer setup. Those on PlayStation 4 Pro and Xbox One X, I've had a much more difficult time. Personally, I played on Xbox One X, and frame rate dips were so frequent that it became nearly impossible to play without having to experience one or two dips in the frame rate. What is even more unfortunate is that enemies remain active during these periods of frame rate dips, meaning you can lose vast amounts of health or even die when the game suffers these frame rate dips. Those who've experienced the Lightspeed ghouls and Scorch from the beta, they're still here. Some enemies are ridiculously persistent and will chase you for miles, but sometimes even give up after a few feet if you're trying to kite them. But due to the limited AP, which is now linked to jump, you can expect to get winded extremely easily unless you invest into certain perks. The leveling system has promise, encouraging players to try out certain skills that you would most likely ignore. You can invest into special, but now there are cards that grant you certain perks, similar to the previous system. You can upgrade your perks to level 3 and equip more than one card depending on what you invest into. Perks can increase in rank depending on how many you invest into, while others also have passive abilities. You can also change and swap out perks in a fly without much issue, but from what I can tell, there's no way to reset your level, meaning that if you invest into a perk early on in a game that you need it but no longer need now, you are stuck with it. Another massive change is the VAT system. As you might expect, since this is a multiplayer game, you can't engage in the slow motion action that the original VATs in Fallout 3, 4, and New Vegas had. Instead, it's all done in real time and seems more like an auto aim program than the original VAT system. Players can still accurately shoot enemies depending on their line of sight and distance from the enemy, but it lacks the excitement that you originally had for slow motionally targeting specific limbs and seeing that cinematic, gory details as the bullet passes through the enemy's body. There are microtransactions here, but everything in the store is available in the game. Players can earn premium currency called atoms by completing challenges, which are plentiful. You only earn cosmetic items, which is a nice way to balance everything, but for the most part it's easily ignorable. Fallout 76 had potential, but it clearly needs a lot of work. The balancing system that promotes the multiplayer experience provides vexing annoyances that the player has to constantly deal with. This, coupled with the endless amount of graphical issues and gameplay affecting problems, leads to an infuriating experience. Bethesda has promised to update the game constantly, but given the state that the game is in, it needs a lot more technical work. It seems more like an early access $60 game than a fully released AAA title. There's no story to really keep you hooked, and the only real incentive to keep playing is to get your character more powerful and explore all the areas, but even then that desire just begins to fade as you find out that you're not really accomplishing anything. There's no point to any of this, and by the end, you'll wonder what it's all for. In the end, Fallout 76 is just a technical mess, and even from a gameplay standard, it eventually becomes something easily forgettable and overshadowed by 2018's much more acclaimed releases.
Well, this is a little awkward. Not what either one of us expected, eh? Anyway, to